Hello and welcome to the Bex Show.
Hi.
Thanks for being here, my friend.
Dude, lovely to be here. Thanks for having me.
It's so exciting. So, Jeremy, let's just get straight into it. Tell me a little bit about what you do in the film industry.
Oh, man. Well, I'm an assistant director. I specialize in reality, but, I come from the land of scripted, as do you.
Yep.
And yeah, just last few years been really adding a lot to the unscripted reality scape out there. But yeah, it's a lot of assistant directing, doing a bit of directing the last few years and starting moving into producing a little bit as well. So yeah, it's
amazing.
It all branches out.
And I was so excited to, chat with you. You have like such a massive resume in terms of, reality and scripted, but mostly reality. And I've only recently got into reality.
Really?
Dude, I moved to Canada. It'll be 6 years as of next month.
Because the UK, it's so...
Yeah, but I never watched reality in the UK. I was always very much like, we have Made in Chelsea. That's
no idea.
it's like a it's like based down in London and it's for like rich people.
Okay.
And it's kind of like your generic, Then we have one called Made in Essex. My mum loved that. Never really got into it. Love Island I did like, but I don't.
That one's popped.
It's a game show to me.
Yes, it is.
Moving here and I started to find Vanderpump Rules is my ultimate favorite TV show.
It's so funny like what identifies with people and what doesn't, and like there used to be a huge market for like the housewife shows and a lot of those like lifestyle shows where you're following personalities around.
Yep.
Like, especially during the like 2010s or the not-nots, like as you guys say, the
not-nots.
Yeah, the 2000s. But it's interesting to see like how it's shifted now. It really is like there are some people who are able to, with social media, grow these shows.
Yeah.
They start off as small audiences and just were able to keep going and gain enough of a following that now it's, they're these massive series with spin-offs and, other characters have shows as well. So it really, I don't want to compare it, but you kind of are building a cinematic universe sometimes.
100%. And I'm so invested in these people. And it's funny, with Vanderpump Rules specifically, I found it 2 years ago and I started, there was a big scandal that happened and I was like, I got to get in on the scandal.
I've never seen the show, but I hear good things.
Like any scandal, I was like, okay, here we go. 11 seasons. Banged it out in like, let's say 2 or 3 months, which is pretty good for someone who works in the film industry and we're always on set. I've watched it 8 times. I just I watch it, then I go
comfort
back
food
to
at this point.
That's exactly what it is. And my husband's always like, dude, like, what's up? This morning, he goes, this isn't real. I was like, it's not real. He's like, it's scripted. I was like, it is not scripted.
Yeah.
It is like...
I love that when people say that because I'm like, you think we could script this?
I'm like, no. I was like,
massaged is usually the word I'll use.
Here's what's happening. They're saying, right, you're all at work at this time, be there. You're all working in the restaurant. They set the scene. Okay, there's a party here. You're all going to be at the party, right?
Yeah.
And he's like, no, but it's scripted, babes. And I'm like, my dude, it's not scripted. Some of them are married in real life. He's like, but are they? You tell me.
I mean, this is the thing. It becomes such a gray area, right? Because there's a point where the reality of their lives sort of is the product. So you kind of start, maybe art follows life some ways. Like I've worked on movies, I'm sure you have as well, where the cast start to mirror their characters' interaction during the show. And it's horrible because if they're fighting in the movie, they're fighting on set. And it becomes this like really tough dynamic. But a lot of times in reality, they'll have an idea of something that's going to happen or people have conflict.
Yep.
So you sort of just put them in the same space and let human nature take over. And that's the big thing about reality and why people, like as a human nature thing, are so interested in it and why we love watching it while we make it. Like, by the time you shoot something in film and television, you've gone over it 30 times in meetings, like, the scene dead to rights. But when you do something in reality, you just put them in this,
let's go.
in a box and see what happens.
They're technically method actors, just going for it.
It's really interesting and it you can see why people get lost in it sometimes as well.
Yeah.
But it also is really interesting for us because it's like watching people in pressure situations. Below Deck is a great example because it's like you get to see people doing their job, doing something well, but also under pressure and all the stuff that comes with that.
Yes.
Which is why I think it's a little lethargic for us as well, like coming from the film industry.
Yeah, 100. Something like Below Deck is insane to me because that's such a small space. Being in the middle of the ocean, that is emotionally a lot.
Yeah, got a lot of friends over there on that one. And it is interesting because it's usually these formats. And like I've done a lot of season ones of stuff and I love them because you really get to develop a whole new concept of how to do something. So like Below Deck, it's a show about the crews of of super yachts, and a lot of the shooting happens in tight, cramped spaces in the below deck areas.
And the crew live on the boat with them as well, or are
It's changed over the years. It depends on the ship. Originally, I was told that they took one of the staterooms and sort of created a mini village in there, and then they would, be able to sort of call the shots from there based on what was happening. So it sort of was like they rigged the boat to be a house reality show.
Yes.
And then they found that that was sort of a tricky way to be able to capture story. And it was quite intrusive and only works on certain vessels. So eventually they were able to, as wireless technology got better, kind of move to a lighter system where it's basically 2 cameras or 3 cameras and a couple of producers.
Yep.
And they're just sort of pointing where things are going.
And you've also got your cameras in-house, right? You've got your Big Brother style.
Your robos.
Yeah.
As we call them.
Robos.
Yeah. And that's the fun part about doing a house reality show is you sort of do get a playground. Like a few years ago, we did a show called Milf Manor. And it got a lot of pop on the internet because of the name, obviously.
What does MILF stand for?
What does SILF stand for?
My parents are probably listening to this and they're like, Mom and Dad, Google what MILF stands for.
I mean, that was the hardest part about sitting in these meetings straight face is talking about the MILFs and the SILFs. But
wait, a SILF?
The SILFs, the sons.
Oh, I'm like, sister?
No, it's the sons.
Weird.
Yeah, it was 8 mums and their 8 sons, and they were taken down to Mexico under the guise that they were going to be on a dating show with 2 different dating pools. And then during the first episode, there's the reveal that they're actually dating each other. And yeah.
Wait, the mums are dating the other mums' sons.
You got it.
Oh my God. I looked at the list of like really cool projects you've done and I went, that was the one where I was like, oh, I know what's up. It's just a load of sexy moms.
The most.
I was like, it's a load of sexy moms in a mansion. Like, I know what's up. I'm now the most interested in this.
Yeah.
So the moms date the sons.
Yes.
And like, what's the age gap? We're talking like 20, 30 years?
Youngest was 19. 19 or 21, I forget, because the drinking age thing was always a bit of I think he was 21, and the oldest was 59. And the youngest and the oldest ended up getting together in the show, which was, I don't know, very interesting. But yeah, dude, the whole thing was very, very crazy. Like the show we did beforehand was my first show I'd ever done in reality. And I did it with a bunch of friends who had asked me to come and work on this thing because they wanted help with it. And it didn't go well.
No?
It went really badly. And it wasn't because of production.
Okay.
It was just the people that they'd chosen to produce the show had come from documentary. And it's a different thing when you work with a crew, right? Like when you work in scripted, things are decided days or weeks in advance.
Yeah. You know what's up.
Unscripted reality, maybe it's a couple days in advance, morning of, you kind of rigging and then you shoot there in the afternoon kind of deal. Documentary, you show up and you figure out what you're doing. Oftentimes you figure out what you're doing in the edit, like afterwards. So
this looks great.
Yeah, right? But for these guys, it was completely like the moon. So they would like send an email out to the entire crew at 3:00 in the morning, a text email just being like, we're not doing any of this tomorrow. This is what we're doing instead, and write out a paragraph. It got so bad, the showrunner ended up leaving the day before we went to camera, had a family emergency, and somebody passed away. And so he left for 2 weeks, put his second in charge, and it went so badly. They had to fly everybody from the network in to take over the show.
No.
They were begging everybody to stay. I was like, I live here, so I'm not going anywhere.
Unless someone else comes to me with more money, like I'm good.
No, I was in, man. It was so interesting. Yeah, but eventually they were like, we'll give you a makeup show, and I was like, okay, yeah, everybody, you hear that a lot, right?
Well, what do you mean a makeup show?
Like a show.
Oh, to make it up to you.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Sorry, that was shit. I thought you meant like, like full glam. I was like.
Makeup competition series.
I didn't realize you were into all of that.
Yeah.
Like, this is new.
Yeah, big Sephora guy. No, but so they were like, we'll give you a makeup show. And I was like, I hear that a lot, And we ended up, Christmas happened. And then January, they called us and said, hey, can you be on a plane to Mexico next week?
Sign me up.
And I was like, yeah, great. So I didn't ask any questions. I just said, I just got all my flight information. We decided on a rate, everything. I got down there and got into an SUV at the Cabo airport, drove 2 hours east to this beautiful, beautiful city called La Paz, and showed up at the hotel and saw a producer I knew sitting at the bar. And she sent me an email with the creative brief. And I just opened the first slide of it and it said, Milf Manor Season 1. And I went, oh man. I was just happy it wasn't F-Boy Island. But not to talk shit about that show. It's a great show. But it's a bit more of a rowdier one to deal with. But and it ended up being Milf Manor. And it was
amazing. And how many seasons has that had?
So it ended up doing 2. Yeah. They did a second season in Ontario, at a lake on Ontario. They really were trying to go to Mexico again, but the tough part with those kind of shows is, especially once it's out there, casting becomes tricky. And to ask the group of people that you want to step away from their lives for 6 weeks is also tricky. So
It's so hard.
yeah, and then you start getting into like seasons and location and crew availability and all that kind of complicated stuff. But
And they hired local crew out there.
it's very specific. It's usually a producer that will work with a PM, and then they'll sort of hire people that they've worked with in the past.
They know and I guess the crew isn't technically as big as what it would be on a TV.
Yeah, it's a little bit smaller. Like I think on that show we had around 80 people.
Oh, wow.
But we were shooting 24/7 as well. So it was like, I don't know, like 15, 20 people in the camera department, 10 in the audio.
Yep.
And then, the other big difference is that nobody's on set. All the crew are on set, but the directors, producers, everybody is in a control room.
Looking at the screens, different things.
Sometimes 10 kilometers away. Like
That's mental.
Yeah,
so they can just really go for lunch whenever. And if something spicy and juicy comes up, you're like, yo, get in front of the screen. Let's go.
Usually the way it works is like with multicam stuff, when you kind of have all the cast together, all the cameras together, that's when you need a director in the chair to really be calling the coverage. Because although you're not cutting it live, when they go back later, you have to make sure that not everybody's shooting the same thing.
Now, I feel like I'm breaking like the fourth wall by asking this question, but like, say there's a fight happening, and like, I know this happened on Vanderpump Rules, that's why I'm bringing it up, but there was a fight between two characters, and I guess the coverage was missed, and it was like such an epic moment. They went back and reshot it. Is that something that actually happens? Like, you can be like, listen, that was great.
If the cast are really on side, like if you've worked with them for a while, like if you think about it from the perspective of somebody that's on these shows, like a lot of time they're putting their personal brand and usually like themselves out there quite a bit.
Yep.
So if something volatile happens and they maybe don't come out of it looking the best, a lot of people are very apprehensive to work with production.
Okay.
Even though it may end up that it makes them look better in the situation. But it also is tough for people too, because it sometimes just comes off as inauthentic. Some people can't act. It takes time, And
I guess that once you've got through one season, you've established the roles. You're the type A, everyone wants to be you, great. You're the villain. So then by the time you get to season 2, 3, 4 of like whatever it is, they got to play on being the villain.
Yeah, I mean, everybody, you do fall into these characters. And it's always interesting because, I'm so much on the logistical side and the timing side and everything that you don't really hear too much on the story side because they are, on fire the whole time that we're shooting. There's usually a team of 10, depending on the size of the show, but they try to have one-to-one coverage, and they'll just have somebody listening to that microphone, especially in competition shows or dating shows.
Yep.
They'll have people listening to people specifically. So if stuff happens, they can alert other story people and the cameras can get coverage of it. Usually what you'll see instead of reshooting is they'll do what's called desyncs. It's a lot of like people turning away or walking away where you don't see their mouth or lips. You're actually trained as a camera operator on a lot of reality shows to try and shoot them. So it's like if I'm talking and you're listening, they'll shoot over my shoulder of you listening and then be able to drop in lines or use that clip out of sync.
So then you've got your cross. I love it.
Yeah.
That's
so
amazing.
There's tricks of the trade, and some people like to say that it's a little disingenuous, and I don't agree with that. I'm not saying it's in every case, but for the majority of it, it's to kind of help tell the story.
Okay.
Like there are times where it's abused. I'm not saying that, but a lot of the time if you see a desync or somebody walks away frustrated or it's like, oh, that shot isn't from there, it's from a different place, or we get this a lot in the Formula One reality series. They're like, that was a different race. And it's like, yes, but the feeling and the sentiment's the same. The emotional truth is there.
Let it go. Let it go. Okay, so that's so cool. So that's kind of like the reality of like dating shows. I want to talk about Ink Masters. That's a show that's been going for a really long time. Like, how many seasons have Ink Masters done?
We're just about to get started on 17. Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah. And I've been there 3 years on Ink Master, and they've done a great job at, it's really a good a testament to how a show can evolve over the years, because they started as a very different type of reality show, and a more combative show.
Yep.
It's really changed now. It's really become a lot more about the art and it's subjective. And
talk me through the premise of the show. Like,
yeah, so it's depending on the season, but generally it's 14 of the best tattoo artists across North America, and they all come together to do. Like any competition show, a series of challenges. Generally, they'll have like an artistic-based challenge and then a tattoo-based challenge, and they'll be given a subject and a style, and then a human canvas will come in with some kind of request, and they'll go through, and there's a whole bunch of gamesmanship about choosing and.
Okay, the people that come in, they're already tattooed people, right? They're not.
Sometimes.
Okay.
Like we've done challenges where it's their first tattoo, and it's like a 4 or 5 hour tattoo, and that's has its drama built into it by itself because, in each one of these little worlds that you work in competition reality shows, like whether it's,
Yep.
chainsaw wood carving or pottery or tattooing, you start to learn the ins and outs of the actual art. And for tattooing, like if you don't know how somebody sits, it can be a big problem. Sensitivity on skin, how they bleed, because you're basically creating a giant open wound.
Well, I didn't even know what that meant. You put a post up about like, oh, anyone interested? And I was like, I know loads
to be
of
human canvases,
to be human. And I was like, I know loads of people. This will be great. I'll be able to help out.
Yeah.
So I like messaged all my people and they came back to me like, oh, I don't sit well. And I was like, okay. Hey, Google, what does that mean?
Yeah.
And I was like, because I have no tattoos. I'm like, I don't think I could ever get a tattoo.
I got one and it kind of sucked. And
did you get it on Ink Masters?
No, I didn't. I didn't. Yeah, it's a bit of a mixed bag, I think. Like, you get a really majority of the time, like it used to be back in the day when it was tattooing was a little bit more of the Wild West. It used to be you weren't sure what you were going to get. So you would actually, a part of the show was some of the drama of the person being unhappy with it. These days, it's very rare that somebody's unhappy with their tattoo. Because at the end of the day, you're getting, especially with all the iPad drawing tools there is now, the detailed printing and stenciling tools and how good the ink and gun technology's got and how open the tattoo world is now. The skill level is so much higher. And when you have some of the best tattoo artists in North America and sometimes, the world, people come from Europe as well, in the UK and stuff, it's you're going to walk away with a unique piece, a piece of art, right? And I think for people that are really into tattoo, what you can, sometimes people want what they can imagine and they just want their own design. Other times they go to artists because they want the artist to make a mark on them. And that's more of what it's become now. People are coming in for these bespoke custom tattoos from, an artist that is automatically talented because they're there,
Yeah.
Like even the first person eliminated usually goes on to do quite well. But again, it's a pressure cooker. These are people putting their personal brands on the line. And like,
truly,
if you fuck up, like
everyone's
it's
gonna
not
see
great.
it.
Yeah, like it can affect people really psychologically. And we've had some really good artists come through that just haven't been able to play the psychological game, and it's taken away from it. But
that's what it is. I've met so many people where I'm like, okay, you'd be great. Put them in front of a camera. They just can't do it. It's hard.
It's the coolest part about reality shows is you never really know what's going to happen or what's going to come up. You can do all the like designing and human psychology, thought process, and how to gamify your show, but you just don't know what's going to pop. Like last summer we did it would have been the largest reality show ever shot, but Mr. Beast was shooting at the same time, and that one rivaled us.
Dude, that guy's insane. I want to talk about him in a moment.
Yeah, that was a tough show. There's some stories that came from that one, but when we did the big survival show, it was called Extracted, and it was 135 cameras, 500 crew. We were shooting across 1,000 acres. And it was 14 survivalists, or 12 in the final edit, and they're 12, 2 members from each one of their family that were living in an HQ. And we thought, of course, the show is going to be about the survivalists. It's going to be all about them. They're going to be doing the challenges in HQ, sending the supplies, and that's where the drama is going to be. It's going to be in the field. It turned out that it started like that and then kind of switched halfway through.
No way.
It started to become where people were really having problems with like taking stuff away from other families or like watching people, other people suffer. Some people even just chose to pull their survivalist out because they couldn't take the drama at HQ.
No way.
So yeah, and it was kind of unexpected in some degree because,
That's kind of cool. And the kind of beauty of reality is you can actually pivot and you can play on that. Whereas with scripted, it's like, Yeah,
it's much tougher to pivot in scripted, especially nowadays, right? Where everything is so
approvals
tightly controlled. We have the technology now to really track dollars and cents, and sometimes to a positive, sometimes to a detriment. Like it can be really tough to, it always comes down to, do we have the extra $5,000 to rent the Menace arm today? That's going to make our scene.
Yes.
Whereas in reality, you're just sort of like, how can we make this work? We have the cameras, we have the people. Most of my job is just making sure that it's all in the right place at the right time. And then you just get to watch the fireworks. Yeah. Which is the best part.
I honestly, I want to come to set one day and just watch. That's all I want to do.
Yeah, it's great because it's actually pretty boring.
I bet come and it's like, so like nothing is happening.
Yeah.
Like
12-hour tattoo. Yeah, that's a long...
I'm going to come to Ink Masters and just be like, yeah, watch me leave with a tattoo.
The finales are very, very long. And sometimes you don't realize it, right? Because it's like, and you're just doing shifts, 3 people at a time, sitting down, everybody else is shooting around. But they're long days, especially for camera operators and stuff. Like,
Yeah.
12 hours on your feet shooting all day. Like, it's intense.
That's, yeah. Now, reality, is it union? The people that work within it?
Canada and the States are a little bit different. So in the United States, the unions recognize unscripted shows. In Canada, for the most part, the rule of thumb is if there's no script, the unions don't bother.
Really?
Yeah, which is a bit interesting to me because I find that is a lot of Canadian content here that's being made by Canadian production companies and airing on Canadian channels that the unions don't touch. And a lot of the rates are very, comparable. It is slightly lower in reality because you're working off of 12s as opposed to 15s for us. But for crews, it's generally quite the same.
Yep.
So I don't know. It's always been interesting to me on why, like DGC says yes to everything. Like they
DGC
do.
strong.
As long as it's minimum wage, you can become a signatory show. It's different for different unions and stuff, but it was just interesting to me that there's so much great content happening that's being done
that's why I asked the question. I'm like, it kind of makes sense to add another string to your bow.
Yeah. Well, being in film coming up on 10 years this May, which is crazy. But
that's wild.
I know, like it's always funny. You're climbing the mountain and then you look down once in a while and see how high up you are. You're like, oh, geez, 10 years.
Yeah.
But it's, and just having get into reality the last 3 or 4 years, I didn't really know there was any kind of community or environment. And, now I'm finding out that there's like a yearly conference that everybody goes to. And there is starting to be more of a community around unscripted, especially in Vancouver, because we're kind of super uniquely positioned with how many skilled crews we have, how our proximity to LA, the amount of gear that we have. And then of course, all the other reasons they shoot up here, the natural beauty, the variety of how it looks, the availability of studio space. So
the tax breaks.
That tax rate needs to go back up. We all need a big year, I think.
Yeah, that's so true. That is so true. But that's so interesting. You have such a big resume in terms of that. So just kind of pulling back, how did you decide to get into film? Like, how did that start?
Yeah, I mean, I was a radio host actually in Vancouver for 2.5 years. I worked at JRFM and The Peak, the Jim Pattison stations, and it was great. I went to radio school and I got hired like a month in, which was awesome.
Sweet.
But it was it gave me a really good look at the industry close up quickly.
Yep.
And I kind of realized that like this isn't something that's going to provide longevity.
Yep.
Like at the time they had started doing what's called voice tracking, where a host will come in and they'll just record their breaks. So it takes them like an hour to record a 6-hour show. And then they can air that in Calgary or air it in Fort St. John or wherever the heck that they want.
Yep.
And usually for radio people, you go to the smaller markets, you kind of earn your way up. You move to a medium market, move to a larger market. Now they don't have those smaller markets anymore. It's a station manager and one personality and everything else is voice tracked out of the major city.
Oh.
Yeah. The other thing is they don't pay you for show prep as well. So I was doing 6-hour shows
bullshit.
a week. It's crazy because it's all the work, right?
That's insane.
Yeah. So I mean, I was doing 8 courses at BCIT and doing 6-hour shows a week. So it was a lot of work and I was just like struggling. I was still living off my student loans, making no money. And then my dad at the time had become a Group 1 Teamster. And they were working on a show. It was Amazon's first original series. It was called The Man in the High Castle.
Yep.
Which is crazy to say because streaming feels like it's been around forever. But this was 2015. Netflix had come out with their first original series, House of Cards, and it had done really well. So Amazon, Jeff Bezos said, "We're going to make this new one." And it was crazy. It was a giant World War II, post World War II, as if the Nazis won. It takes place in North America in the 1960s in a Nazi America.
Yep.
And it's a book by Philip K. Dick. It's against fascism. But it was wild because it was like this massive crew with these huge people, $1 million episodes shutting down, entire blocks of Granville Street, dressing it like the 60s. And it was really cool to be around. And I could make at the time $250 a day, which
back then was good.
It was like 3 days work in my regular job, and it was within one day. We were doing something that was cool. And so I just, ended up doing that for a couple of months during the summer. It actually ended up, it was right after I lost my radio job, which happens quite a bit. They'll clear lineups. It's just the business every year or so. They'll wipe it. You'll move to a new station or jump to the other station. And yeah, just ended up loving it. Fell in with a group of people that was really passionate. And like, I think you were very similar where you started on a show that was a larger show. You were working with people that were, working at a high level already. So you were, able to bring up to that level quite quickly.
Absolutely. I got super lucky. I mean, I started out as an actor and came here and, COVID had hit. So that's I know. So I was like, I gotta figure this out.
Yeah.
We really had to hustle. And I had a friend who was like, oh, you'd be a PA. And he knew I'd wanted to direct and, do all of that stuff as well as acting. And I became a PA on Shogun. And within a couple of days of being there, they were like, you interested in being an AD? And I'm like, this is all I want.
Yeah.
Boom.
It's crazy because PAing, it's the most entry-level job position there is. You're literally emptying trash. And it's funny, like you say it, but when I started, it was still a very tough job to get. In Vancouver, it was like people would, be a training assistant director for years or be a third assistant director their entire careers.
Yeah.
So it was, getting a PA gig was even tough back then. And we were lucky that we fell into a show regularly where they kept us. And by the time we were looking for work after that, streaming boom had sort of begun to begin. But really, like working as a PA, it's an audition to every other.
Absolutely. And it's funny because I look around, especially when I'm on set, and I'm like, I see people just sat doing nothing. And I'm like, you want to be the best of the best. Like, what are you doing? Like,
the attitudes have definitely changed over the years.
I love talking to people when I have that free second. I'm like, oh, what do you want to do? A lot of times it's like scripty, this or that. If I wanted to be the scripty and I was put in a village, I'd be eyes like a hawk watching. And, that's how you get picked up and you just hustle and work. We're in a really funny time in the film industry now. There's not a lot of work. And it's funny to see.
Well, we sort of had this balloon and then this correction period. And we're still kind of gating out of that correction period a little bit.
Yep. And it's funny to see a lot of the people that are working are full members, which I'm all for.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes you see those people on set and they don't want to do the role. They don't want to do the task at hand because they've got this seniority complex. And it's like, no, like this is what you got to do, my friend.
I mean, I get it because it's tough, right? You want to move up if you've been doing a job for a number of years, but also like, I think it really comes back down to the fundamentals and something that like was instilled in me early when I started. Like we started in the era where people would still yell at you. And I'm not saying that's the way to.
You don't get yelled at?
I mean, yes, you do. It just happens at a much lower tone now. People, it's not as much volume.
HR in mind.
It's not as much volume as it is shame. Especially when you're talking to executives. But no, like it's so you learned a lot of hard lessons early, right? And I think for a lot of people, it's good that the attitudes have changed now. But I also think that like people don't realize how much stuff is unseen. That work ethic. Like I was PAing on a commercial last week. Like I've been a first AD regularly for the last 4 years. I've been in film 10 years. I've done some of the largest reality shows in the world. I don't mind driving a truck. Like it's great. It's, and it's that fun bit where you can kind of, it's the best part about the film industry. You can sort of slot in anywhere.
100%. You have a good attitude and a good work ethic and you're good to go.
Totally.
It's so important. It's so important.
You're all, I use a lot of analogies when I first, because it's just the natural thing you have to lean on so you're not saying the same thing all the time. But you're all literally trying to row the boat in the same direction. Whether you're the PA that's setting up the lunch tables or the person emptying trash at circus or the first AD calling action on set, like it's all important. And if the pieces aren't there, like, it makes a big difference. Like it affects people, and having the ability to positively affect something is a huge power and responsibility, even at the lowest levels. And a lot of people forget that and think that what they do isn't important. And everything that we do is important. It's just, it's all about and people see that, and the care and the pride that you take in your work, I think extends universally. And, when you're stressed and you're tired and you move up and you get into those positions of power and you're on a really tough show.
Mm-hmm.
Like the Extracted show was really tough because our field transmission system just didn't work. And
well, that was 2 hours of my life. I'm never going to go back.
After a minor interruption,
we had a 2-hour power cut, and we just sat yip yapping. I'm yip yapped out.
No, it's great. I mean, we're teed up beautifully for the back half here.
We totally are. I don't even know what we were talking about. What were we talking about?
I already forgot. We just refreshed ourselves a minute ago.
Yeah, we did. Let's move on.
Oh, yeah.
My number one question for you was actually like, as a child growing up, were you interested in film? Like, I always meet a lot of people and they're like, well, yeah, I mean, like, did you love film? And like, you're like, this is what I've got to do.
I think it was, not to get too deep into it, but as a wee boy, I think like growing up in the 90s, late 90s and early 2000s, we were sort of in this miracle area of where practical effects and special effects and visual effects, like there wasn't really the computer technology to really make things visually. Yep. So we were in the golden age of like practical effects and special effects. So, I mean, I used to watch movies like Flubber and stuff as a kid, and you'd be like, how did they do that? Or Ghostbusters, like how did they get you know? So there was these great, you're always so interested in
Casper.
Even commercials sometimes. You're like, I don't understand how they did that, because it was, you know, something that was like visually impossible to do. Going through walls in a television show or something like that, you're like, whoa, or underground.
Yep.
So when there's always kind of been that interest, but I guess like the big thing, it sort of built out of boredom, honestly. When I was a kid, I was raised Catholic, and we did catechism, if you know what that is. It's
No, what's
basically
that?
It's basically Bible school, like
Okay.
Catholic Bible school, but they do it like after school. So you go like once a week on like a Wednesday for 2 hours,
Yep.
and you go every grade, and it's part of like the Catholic faith. You like do your first communion, you do your first confession, and then you get confirmed, usually close to grade 7.
Yep.
So I was raised very, very, you know, Christian, or very Catholic, and then we switched over to an evangelical Christian church. At the time, it was called Victory Christian Center. Now it's called Relate Church. They're still going out in Surrey, but they were they had like a television studio and the church. So it's very Hillsong, if you know what that is. It's like a large band, massive
That's
lights, huge
amazing.
cameras. And when we started going, it was great. Like seeing guitars and bands play up there was
Flying Jesus.
yeah, exactly.
Like,
Pouring out from the center of the
no,
stage.
don't they have like people like on wires? Like,
I mean, maybe during like a some sort of flamboyant play or something, sure. But no, ours was more like, you know, guitar, rock bands, somebody comes up and preaches kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it was a lot of multimedia stuff. And right when we started going, I was really interested in that, mostly to be able to just get out of sitting in church.
Yep.
But it ended up becoming you know, you start doing the words, and then you move into, you know, doing playback, and then maybe you try to slide into a lesser camera role, you know, one of the wider shots or something like that. And then they start to trust you. They'll give you stage cam. So by the time I was 12 years old, I was working as a camera operator every weekend, because I was the only one that could fit under the rafters
That's
with the camera,
amazing.
shoot up at the drums, shoot up at the guitar. It was perfect. But it started a love. And a lot of people who I worked with back then,
Yep.
you know, guys that were either technical directors above me or camera operators alongside me,
Yep.
now are IATSE, you know, 669
That's
camera
amazing.
operators. And I see them on set, and I work with them a ton. And that, you know, really kind of blossomed. They upgraded their studio. They went to a 5-camera full HD studio in like 07.
Wow.
So I was doing like broadcast editing, green screen stuff. I was technical directing. We even did a couple of DVD recordings where we brought in dollies and specialty cameras.
That's crazy.
Actually,
they had the money for like all of that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, well, the thing was too is they had the pastors at that church. This is totally off brand, but the pastors at the church had a show previous, and it did quite well. It was called Pure Sex and Relationships, and it was like the Christian view of pure sex and relationships, and it would air locally here, and it did quite well. So they were able to sort of piggyback that with TV deals, and
Yeah.
it ended up working quite well, because that's the way a lot of churches went. Like Hillsong really popped for a while. They even did tours, North American tours, where they would sell out, you know, stadiums and stuff. So for a while it was a big thing, but a lot of people I feel like got their start on the church side of things, because there's not a lot of places where they'll let you operate that kind of professional level of equipment so openly and accessible. And it's also a place where you do have industry experts working either on their off times or volunteering their time. So you do get the chance to like rub shoulders with people who do it professionally. So for a lot of people, especially in the United States where there's a lot of mega churches, it's how they start.
The mega churches.
The mega churches, yeah. And like that, you know, it was fun because the group of people we had at the time ended up, you know, we'd start doing film festivals. We started doing more stuff like World War II style stuff that was like not directly related to church. And the church was fun too, because they would host, you know, MMA events, conferences, police funerals, all sorts of stuff. So you really get the chance to be a specialty camera operator at a bunch of things. And
that's great that you get to. I find the church thing so interesting. I went through a phase in COVID. I was obsessed with Scientology. Not because I ever wanted to be a Scientologist, just
that's
to like
a whole other world.
But like, what the? Like,
Yeah.
So, like, I went home to England and I was like to my parents, I was like, do you know what Scientology is? They were like, no. And I was like, okay, we're going to watch this documentary.
It's almost like a social club.
It's like, it's obviously a cult.
Yeah.
But it's like, and they have that whole TV world as well.
Yeah. I mean, there are a lot of churches in the United States where people like, you know, guys like Joel Osteen, or, you know, there's 100 names you can name, the TV pastors that have these big mega churches and stuff. And, you know, that comes and goes. And for a lot of people, it's just about what they're going through personally at the time. But, you know, it's not a bad place to raise a family. You know, it instills good values. There's a lot of people around that are in the community and stuff as well. And if you're interested as a kid in film or television, like it's a great entry level way, low risk way to be able to do stuff. You know, nowadays I can walk around saying I've been a front of house engineer, I've been a specialty camera operator, I've been a technical director. I was a video editor for years. And those skills at the end of the day make you a better AD. Like
Yeah.
everything you learn contributes to your ability to be able to judge and kind of decode situations and what's happening. If you know how lighting and gripping works, you can kind of understand how long a setup is going to take. And
truly, one of my favorite things to do on set is be like, oh, I bet this is like 25 minutes. Time it. And you're right, all these different things, all these life skills mold you to be a better leader, because that's what we do. We're the leaders on set.
Well, and we're, I think, so obsessed. And I don't know, like myself, I'm very competitive, and I always think about how I'm progressing through industry. And, it's not that you want to reach that next level. Like I've never come in and been like, I'm a third AD now, I want to be a second AD. I'm a second AD now, I want to be a first AD. I think it's just been more that I've really wanted to have a job that's continuously difficult. And I think I've found that, which is great, because it, at every level you get comfortable, you get used to it, and then you move up to the next rung, and suddenly you're back at base, And as you start to slide up more, you become a second, you become a first, you start directing stuff, become a producer. Those skills, everything you've done, whether it's radio broadcasting, large scale television shows, or shooting 1,000 different church sermons across, 10 years, all that stuff makes you a well-rounded
absolutely
technician.
You can tell the difference, I always find, as well, with the people who haven't done the time and haven't actually come up within the industry.
Yeah.
They don't have the same skills.
Yeah.
And it's super obvious, because
it really is the Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hours. Like you can try to fake it as much as you want. And like, don't get me wrong, there are people that come into industry and you're like, oh, this person gets it. Like I'm sure you've worked with Tads who you're like, oh, it's sick. Like this person, what? This is your first show? How?
Yeah.
Like you clearly know what's going on.
Yeah.
Whereas like, for me, like,
but that's
I had to
life
learn.
skills.
Yeah.
That person will have life skills. They'll have done different careers. They know what's up.
Exactly. And the big thing is just taking that experience and making it relevant for what you're doing. And like, I think so many people are very scared to work outside their, like I was very scared to do a reality show after coming from scripted. But and now I find that like, I feel like an evangelist, to stay with the church theme. I feel like I'm pulling people into unscripted because so many people are scared to work outside of their, but the thing is like, if you're good at what you do, yeah, it's going to be an adjustment for sure. And you're probably going to have to like, ask some advice on things and how to handle situations. But for the most part, those skills are completely transferable, and you're going to come in better equipped than 99% of people.
Dude, if you said to me, hey, do you want to do a reality? Sign me up.
Yeah.
Yes, I do. I'll also be in it. Like Milf Manor.
Want to be one of the sylphs?
Go tell my husband I said that. Could you imagine? But I love it. I think it's great. So my question for you now is, if you didn't work in film, what would you do?
I don't know, man. I mean,
I'd be a stand-up comedian. That's what I would do.
Yeah?
100%. I'd love to do that.
I mean, I'm not much of a writer, so I mean, I think a lot of my skill set lies in really elevating stuff and making stuff good.
Okay.
I'm not a big creative force, but I love taking something and really elevating it. So probably cooking. I think it's probably the next.
So a chef?
Yeah, maybe something like that. Like I feel like I do that kind of to relax more often than not. I probably want to say like some sort of motorsport driver, but I'm not rich, so yeah.
There's nothing worse than a job where you have to have money to actually make it your job.
Exactly. I spent $2,000 on a sim rig right before the pandemic started, and it was the best $2,000 I ever spent.
I don't know what?
On a simulator rig. It's like the driving simulators, like the seat and the pedals and got
big
way
dude
into
energy.
Well, you know what? It's so funny because like I found a real difficulty trying to figure out something I could enjoy outside of work.
That's so important to find that thing.
I grew up with a bunch of brothers. I grew up playing sports.
Yeah.
And like, that's not really something you can do.
No, because energy consuming.
Well, it's energy, but it's also, sometimes I'm out of country for 2 or 3 months. Sometimes I work every Saturday for, 8 months or whatever
Commitment
it is,
issues. Right? You don't know if you can get there.
We won't start with the commitment issues, but yeah, I mean, playing organized sports is tough. You can do dropping and stuff, but it's something you gotta have to really love in order to do. So
Yeah.
I found it difficult to like sit down and focus on something because like, role playing games and video games as well were something that like I used to enjoy, but I don't have the attention span for anymore. Even media, long form media.
Yeah.
It's really tough, especially when you're working. Your brain is very short to, it's used to jumping from one thing to another. It's hard to sit down and watch long form media. So YouTube tends to be how I absorb everything.
Yeah.
And, I also have a pretty good media diet as well, but it's the same thing with entertainment is like, I can't sit down and spend 2 or 3 hours playing a video game. So racing was sort of perfect. I could spend 20, 30 minutes really focus on something that's intense, adrenaline inducing, and requires a lot of focus and technique, and something you can build and get better at over time, it had a lot of parallels to.
Do you think those skills transfer to your actual driving? Like, are you a good driver?
Oh yeah, I'd say probably the one video game the one thing that like I'd say like flight simulators and driving simulators are probably the two things that like really transfer to real life.
That's amazing.
Because if you're fast driving in a legit racing simulator, you will be fast driving in a race car.
Yeah.
And that's the fun part.
You know what I was thinking about the other day? In England, and I don't think we have it over here, in England, if you're a new driver and you drive too fast and you get in trouble, you get a black box in your car and it monitors how fast you go, and it's based on your insurance.
Interesting.
How crazy is that? I was telling someone, and they were like, that's kind of weird.
Well, the thing is now is it seems crazy to us over here, but it's not as crazy anymore because your car actually now records all those things automatically. Like whenever you like,
yeah,
you know, like I have front forward collision warning, and sometimes it gets it totally wrong. Somebody's turning off or something, it freaks out and lets me know I need to brake immediately. And it's like, no, I don't. Every time you don't emergency brake for that, or it requires emergency braking, it records it. And your dealership, especially if you lease a vehicle, will look at that data when you service it. And when you get your next vehicle, they will like wage how much like
I would be writing notes. I'd be like, listen, this one time on January the 7th at 4:17 p.m., that wasn't a thing. Let that go.
It's just going to get worse and worse too, because right now it's the worst. It's as bad as it'll ever be. I bet you they're going to start like taking those, you know, extreme braking, or if you speed a lot, and start roping those into your insurances. It doesn't seem that far-fetched.
I've never leased a car. I bought my car when I moved. I have like a Jeep Liberty 2006, best car I've ever owned. I love it. It has no like weird things. It's only, you can only have it full.
Because the whole thing is weird. That thing is a mutant.
But you can only have it like too hot or too cold.
Ass.
It's kind of, I love a boxy
car.
I love a boxy car. It's
me too. But not the Jeep Liberty.
It's so nice.
I mean, I don't know. I had a Jeep, and the engines that Stellantis produces are so poor.
Dude,
it kills me.
It's great. Like, I'll let you know when it dies.
Yeah, but I mean, those are one of those vehicles, those 2000s vehicles where you can there's not a lot of electronics in it. You can ride it. It's like the old Toyotas. Like, you can still fix it for the most part.
You're living your best life. I love my Jeep, and it's great. Like, I go up in the. I'm a girl boss in my Jeep Liberty.
See, most of the time I drive rental cars, and I try not to be too like I love a peppy car, but you know, there's times like we shoot a lot out of country, and generally when you shoot out of country, they'll bring the whole crew, they'll put them up into like Airbnbs, especially if they're there for a few months. Like if it's a hotel friendly city, they'll do that, but a lot of times it's Airbnbs, rental cars, and it's neat because you're suddenly in a city with a bunch of your friends that have their own apartments and their own vehicles, and you just get into these antics where you're driving around different areas. Like especially when we were shooting in Italy, we were in a rural part of Italy, so every night we'd have to like rush to a restaurant because the chefs union in Tuscany closes all restaurants at 11 o'clock.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and they don't serve food between 3 and 5. So it's like you make it for lunch, or you make it for dinner, or you don't eat at all.
You figure it out.
Yeah, so a lot of times you get there and you order a beer and you order your food to go and you order a bottle of wine to go, and you go home, or you go to whoever's apartment. And it was really great because every one of these little towns had like a specialty, some sort of speciality that they had like perfected over time. And because it was Italy and it was built 1,000 years ago or 2,000 years ago, it's every three.
Not that long ago.
Well,
I'm kidding.
In North America, it's a long time. In Europe,
just for context, when we had our 2 hours off, we were talking about like old houses, and someone was saying, "Oh, like
that 100-year-old house,
the 100-year-old
so
house,
beautiful,
so old, so beautiful." And me as an English person, it's just like, it's not that old.
Yeah,
is it?
Oldest city in North America is like what, 1609 or something. Albany, New York, on the East Coast. It's not a long history here. But I mean, the cool part is like you get this history that's come up over time. You know, like one town has a specialty in making super sharp steel knives. The other one has a speciality in making a certain type of burrata cheese. Like it was really neat and every single one had a tiny restaurant, and it really made for some nice nights out. And the cool part about doing travel shows is, and part of the reason I feel like I'm a bad traveler, like outside of work, is because like having the pressure of the work and the anxiety and stuff, every time you get to go out and do something fun, feels like an escape, you know?
Yeah, it does.
And you generally get to learn a lot of the like really cool places and secrets, because those are the places and secrets that the fixers are lining up for the show. So it's areas you normally wouldn't have access to as a tourist. You get to really enjoy a lot of things you normally wouldn't, you know?
Yeah. It's a dream. The only thing I hate about being away from like wherever your home base is, I hate being on a shuttle. Like,
On a what?
a shuttle.
Oh, a shuttle.
Being on a shuttle in general, I hate it. Like, that's the worst part of working in the film industry. When I went up and did The Last of Us, I was staying like an hour and a half away from the base where the coach would get you to go right up this mountain.
Was this Kananaskis?
This was Kananaskis.
Yes.
And
I did my days on that show as well.
oh my God. You'd wake up.
But you guys almost had a better deal because at least you were in a town where there was stuff.
Where were you?
Well, I wasn't, but the people that I was working with were all up at the lodge closer to set, which everybody thought was great because it was a 5-star mountain lodge. But the issue is, and I've had this before, where they think, oh, we'll put the first AD up on Mount Washington because he'll love it. It's the off season. Nothing's open. There's no stores. There's no amenities. You have to eat at the $50 burger restaurant or nothing. And it's like, yeah, you know, it sucks taking an hour shuttle in every day, but you know what sucks? Not being able to live your life, having to pay $45 to get a shirt washed at the hotel.
But I was staying like pretty far out and it was fine. The people, like, it was a great vibe. But in the morning, the shuttle would come and I would say to the shuttle driver, hey, can I please sit up front? I'm going to be car sick.
Yeah.
And they would be so mad. They'd be like, oh, my bag's there. This one morning, I get there and I sent an email to the chick who was organizing all the transport. And I was like, listen, can I please always sit up front? I'm struggling with being travel sick, which was true. The first day I got there, I was in all my layers and I was like fucked up immediately.
Because you got into the shuttle with your layers on? Oh, no. Unless it's a cold shuttle, you gotta come down.
No, it's -20 outside. I get in the shuttle and I'm the last person to be picked up.
Because they'll do that on mountain shows. Everyone will come down in their gear and they'll have the AC on, all the windows open.
You're like,
oh. No, because it's honestly more comfortable to sit in your warm gear in a cold shuttle than it is.
But I get into the back of the car and I was like, okay, I guess I can't sit up front. Cool. Sat there the whole time I was like this. And I got to work and I was like, you good? I was like, no, I'm not. It was hard work. So anytime I'm in a shuttle, it just gives me the ick.
See, I've been there. When we did the Extracted show, the big survival Fox show out in the it was a 45-minute shuttle. And because of the number of crew we had, everybody had to go out at a giant wave. So we had a 24P, an off-road one.
Okay.
But when you're a high wheelbase and you're in a box, it's just doing this the whole time. And you're all there with your bags and your camera equipment on you. It was a 45-minute drive down a logging road.
No.
An FSR, yeah. And you're just back and forth. And then you get out, and you throw all your gear on your shoulders, and you hike down another 20 minutes just to get to the start point, and then you hike to the sites. Or we ended up devising a system where the safety boats would actually just motor on out there because it was actually funny. A lot of these shows, you like try to hide what you're doing in behind the scenes.
Yep.
And the way you do that is like by trying to be very discreet, quiet motors or sneaking into areas. But on a survival show where you're outside, you become hyper aware of every noise and stuff that's happening around you.
I bet, yeah.
So it ended up being, instead of a strategy of trying to hide our actions by like being secretive with like electric motors and doing whatever, we just had to make noise all the time. Run the gators, run the boats, run them everywhere. Because then every time they hear a boat engine, they're not like, oh, somebody's getting medevaced or somebody's getting extracted. They're just like, another boat engine.
Yes. Then they don't know how the game's going because it's just
Exactly.
consistent.
You hide in that.
I always wondered, is it Alone that's done on Vancouver Island?
Alone is done all over the place. So this was with a lot of the producers that were from Alone. And I have a good chunk of friends that are on Alone. And
it's a good show.
They move around quite a bit, but they also design the show in a way that naturally the environment is going to overtake you before they get, so like they'll start in September. Like the last one that I can use as an example, they did at Reindeer Lake in Saskatchewan.
Yep.
It's an island on a lake in the northern area of Saskatchewan. So it gets very cold very quickly in the wintertime. So they started in September, and as it slowly got colder, plantage, all the foliage dies off, all the berries and stuff. And then they basically have to survive on fish and meat. And there's a point where you can chop as much, like you can't chop enough wood to keep yourself warm enough to like, and eat enough calories in order to chop enough wood to keep yourself warm. So there's a natural end to the show.
Yep.
But it can go a long time. And
because you don't know when the end goal is.
Exactly.
Like,
and that's a very interesting show because you don't know when you're going to be done.
Like, yeah.
A good friend of mine was the DIT on it, and he was expecting to come home middle of November, and they ended up coming home middle of December.
Because I guess, like, do you have, like, camera people? Well, no, because it's
all self-shot.
Isolated.
It's all self-shot for the most part.
Yeah.
They do have, like, a battery charge station in a box that's on the side there. And then they can swap out batteries and cards
that's what
and
the
media.
contestant will do themselves.
Exactly. So, like, every day or 2 days, they I believe it's every day. It's a little foggy now because we had all these discussions months and months ago. But basically, they have like an otter box or something on the end, and they will swap out the media card for a new one and a battery every day at the same
Someone will
time.
sneak up.
Exactly. They just do it as a routine kind of
But
thing.
that's the best part of the day. They're like, human life.
Yeah, and as it gets crazier, like they start doing it every 3 days, and when they do the med checks sort of thing, because it is truly like you're kind of monitoring remotely,
Yeah.
and you don't really know what's happening until you go and you pick up the footage and are able to watch it back and figure out what the story is doing, and then you know affecting that. It really is a set and sort of forget, and that's why Extracted was super interesting because we had everybody from Survivor. We had a lot of people from Alone. Well, you know, we had a lot of people that had done the Bear Grylls shows and stuff that are a little bit more produced. So there was a really good balance of experience, but nobody had really ever worked on a outdoor challenge-based show before. Survivor people know what's up, but it's a controlled island these days. So it really became a kind of speciality. And like every day you're we had a HOD meeting at the beginning and the end of every day because we would build the creative, figure out what we were going to do, build the challenges, and then have to create all the logistical plans, where we're going to stick cameras, and then what we could transmit back to base so that the families could watch. So it ended up being a really complicated problem solve. But the fun part with those shows is when you work with a team of people who are very, very good at what they do, a lot of the time you guys end up being bored on shows. But when there's a real difficult problem to solve, something that frankly just hasn't been done before, and you have to try and figure out a structure in order to save it.
Yeah.
Problem solving with really talented people is the best part of the job.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's what it's about.
It honestly, when you just don't know how it's all going to come together and you just keep working the problem, and at the end of it, it looks fantastic.
And for your role, you don't see it until it's aired, I guess, the majority of the time.
Yeah. And I mean, it's very interesting too when you do reality because it's so many camera feeds and it all feeds into a control room where everybody's looking at it and you're really just, you know, trying to keep a good idea on what's happening in the physical space.
Yep.
Because the director will say to you, I need that tight shot of so-and-so closer. And it's like, you got to know where that person is, what camera's looking at that person. And it gets complicated.
You got to know who you're calling, who's operating that camera.
You'll do 15, 20 cameras. And it becomes even more complicated when you're patching it through a DJI receiver, going into a tear deck, down a network line, into a different thing is being broadcast in a different window. Director says camera 16. Well, camera 16 is actually WX8, which is actually camera 24, which is operated by Carly. So it's like you got to have a little. It gets very, very So it's a mix of real like old style film and live broadcast television.
Yep.
Because really, like once you put people in there and you start them, you're sort of live. You know, there are situations, especially in dating shows, where you can sort of be like, "I'm so sorry, can you say that again? We just didn't have the coverage." Generally, especially competition shows, there's so much standards and practices that goes into it.
Yep.
If you give one person a blanket, you have to give everybody a blanket. Yeah, they were stuck in the shade on the wrong side where they were waiting for the boat to come back and put them, and they started going into hypothermia. You gave that person a blanket, everybody gets a blanket.
Really?
Yeah, so it gets very, very complicated. But again, all the variety of the work brings it.
It's just like, okay, this is my last question. I just always have so many questions with like just reality TV.
It can go so
do you
far.
ever get people who like break the fourth wall and they turn and just go like, what the fuck? I don't want to be here. Like they lose their shit.
Yep. All the time. And it happens so often. And actually, we do plan for it. We'll generally, especially in high tension moments or elimination moments or on dating shows and stuff, we generally will designate 1 to 2 cameras as holy shit cams. So, I mean, I've had one of the first reality show we did that went very poorly. Not on the production side, but on the producing side.
Yeah.
It went into like 2 years of reshoots and edits, and they had to do a bunch of supplemental interviews just to.
Sounds expensive.
It came out 3 years after we shot it, which is very rare for reality shows. Usually the post production is 6 to 8 months, and then it's maybe waiting for an air slot. But it was so wild and so uncontrolled, and then they were just liquoring a bunch of people up and putting them in a room that eventually something racial had come up where somebody had accused somebody else of almost saying a racial slur, but he stopped himself. And it turned out not to be true, and it was just like a whole bit of drama. But it got very heated. It almost got physical. And one guy who seemed like he was a big dude, 6'5", ex-NFL player, seemed like he was about to start throwing punches. And I'll never forget this. And honestly, props and shout out to all the reality operators out there, because on the mining shows, on the survival shows, these guys are as much in the shit as any of the contestants, if not more, because they're carrying 100 pounds of camera gear on their back. Yep. But this guy just about starts a violent fight, runs out the room, heads towards the elevators, and camera operator Chris Johnson rips his camera off, full speed runs down the hallway. He was at the designated holy shit cam, and I'm looking back in the footage, you could not tell. I called him Jello Hips Johnson for a year after that because it was rock solid steady. The whole way he's running down the elevator, he sticks his leg in, stops door from closing, stands in the elevator with this guy who just about got into a fight, pointing the camera directly in his face. And the guy's like, hey, man, I don't want to be filmed right now. And Johnson just goes, sorry. And sits in the elevator with this guy and films him. And if it were me, like, I'm not that ball. Like, I'm worried of getting my ass kicked. But he had no fear. And some of these men and women that do this kind of stuff, and on shows like Highway Through Hell, or where the conditions are very, very tricky, and you almost become like, especially like on a survival show, like we don't break for lunch, and people don't go back and have catered lunch. You stop and eat where you are.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of that.
You know what you're signing yourself up to, something like that. It's like what you're signing. Yeah. Takes a certain.
But you know what? Like props to those guys, the talent that comes out of it, and the footage that sometimes they capture, and the human moments that you capture. When you feel like people aren't looking, or you have that moment to actually relax, or you just forget. Those are the bits that make reality television worth watching, and those are the pieces that people come for. Because at the end of the day, like, everybody's there to see a human reaction, and that's why reality TV is what it is, because when you put people in a pressure situation, we all hope that we would do the best that we could, but seeing people do it for real, it's the best fun. It's the most fun.
I love it. Well, thank you for taking your time to come and chat with me. My favorite episode, I was just reality TV shows. Like, I'm literally going through the list of things you've worked on and just watching them. The next one I'm going to watch is obviously Milf Manor, because I'm obsessed with the stories.
It's great. It's so fun. And you know what? Like, this is my 5th year in reality television, my 10th year in film. And like, as a first assistant director, every day, every show I do, you get to learn something different. And, whether it's a pottery competition show or, a dating competition show in the middle of Mexico, getting to learn the different formats and different story ideas, it makes you a better rounded filmmaker. When I go back and do shows like Last of Us and Man in the High Castle and Sabrina or whatever these horror shows are, it really does bring a different appreciation, different angle to filmmaking, and makes you more adaptable as well. So 100%. Biggest thing I'll say to people, get out there, do different stuff, add the variety. It's just gonna make you a better rounded filmmaker.
Awesome. Well, thank you.
Thank you, dude. Always lovely seeing you.
Always. Okay. See you later. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.